Hi, it's Dan with EUJUICERS.com, coming to you as always from our offices here in the heart of Europe. And in this video, I'm going to share with you our consensus picks for our top 3 favorite vertical juicers. This is being filmed in the end of 2018, just keep that in mind. Now, you notice I didn't say the best vertical juicers, but our favorites. That's because I think it's hard to come up with a list of best juicers. It's because everybody's different and everybody has different needs. Some juicers are great for greens, other juicers might be good. You know, if you're just doing citrus, if you want orange juice, you don't need a slow juicer. You could use a centrifugal or even a little citrus press. But everyone's needs are different, their budgets are different, so it's really hard to say, hey, this is the best juicer. It depends on you and what you plan to do. There's a lot of factors to consider. What's your budget? You know, what's the price range? Obviously, what you're juicing. Do you want something that's going to juice fast, or is that not such a concern for you? Do you want something with not much pulp, or do you like pulp in your juice? So many factors. Subjective factors too. Do you like the design of a juicer, the color? How much room do you have or space do you have in your kitchen? Is this something that's going to be on the counter or put away? So a lot of things to consider if you're trying to make a list of best juicers, and that's why we don't. There's just too many factors. But favorite juicers? That's a lot easier question to answer. See, here at EUJuicer, we have offices in many countries in Europe, and the guys there, they don't only sell juicers, but they're using these juicers. Maybe more importantly, they're servicing these juicers, so they know them very well. And I sent an email out about a week ago asking a simple question. Just said, hey guys, if your best friend came to you and said, I'm in the market for a vertical juicer, what would you recommend? Or what are your top 2 or 3 picks and why? I had my own list and I compiled the results from everybody and created a list. My list had to change. Some of my favorite juicers went off the list, some new ones went on, but this is just a consensus of what we would recommend, our favorite juicers. So real quick, before I get to number 3, let me just explain what the difference is between a vertical and horizontal slow juicer and kind of how it works. This here is the Omega VRT 352. This was the juicer that kind of started the whole idea of vertical juicers, the first real quality juicer. And it works in a real simple way. These both work in a simple way. Produce or fruit, vegetables, whatever, they go down these feeding tubes. And in the case of a horizontal, there's an auger. It's a spinning screw. And it breaks off little pieces and it squeezes it into a smaller area, almost like chewing it with your teeth, until it's finally forced under pressure at the very tip here against a small metal screen. That metal screen has tiny little holes. The pulp is pushed against those holes, the juice comes through, the pulp stays in. In the case of a horizontal, the pulp is coming out here and the juice is routed down here. We're looking at verticals. These have a much bigger juicing screen. One thing that means is they take a little longer to clean because the screens are the toughest thing to clean. But it's got a big screen here. The pulp is being forced down vertically. Gravity typically feeds these guys. Normally you don't need to push them, which is an advantage. And the pulp is pushed down mostly to the bottom of this screen here, through those holes, and the pulp stays inside. It's routed out through this outlet. The juice comes out here. Most vertical juicers operate on this same principle, and you'll see that. So since this Omega 352 came out, there's been advancements. Excuse me, there's been wide mouth juicers, there's been slightly different technology, motors have gotten better, the system of cleaning has gotten better. The modern ones are easier to clean. There's a lot of little improvements, and these are the things that we thought about when we came up with this list. Okay, so enough of me talking. Let's get to what you wanted to see, and that's number 3 coming up next. Coming in at number 3 is the Kuvings EVO 820, also called the Kuvings Evolution. Now, Kuvings kind of invented the wide mouth vertical several years back. That first model, it was just called the whole slow juicer. It was pretty good. The biggest feature was the wide feeding tube, otherwise it was okay. A few years later, they made a lot of refinements and they created the whole slow juicer Elite, which is a really good juicer, still available now. And just this year, they made the 3rd generation of their wide mouth vertical, and that's the Evolution. And that's a good name for it. It really is an evolution. It's not a revolution. There's not a huge number of changes or some big radical difference, but mostly small incremental improvements. Let me show you some of those. First of all, with one reason we like this, and it's on our favorites list, is the design. It's perhaps, design subjective, but maybe the best looking juicer out there. It's got this textured finish on the front, just has a real solid premium feel, something we really like. Some small differences they made. This pulp outlet here is a little bit wider. They've reinforced the juicing chamber, made it a little stronger. There's more attachment points on it. And besides that, it uses the same technology as their second generation juicer. That is the 240 watt motor, big auger. These wide mouth verticals, these things tend to use brute force to make your juice. It's because they have a big opening. You can put a lot of things in there, big pieces of carrot, in some cases whole apples, smaller ones. And they have these big 240 watt motors, massive augers, and they just really push hard. The big plus on something like this is it's fast. I've done some videos where I juice the same recipe in wide mouths like this guy, and then in a standard mouth, and these will generally do it in almost half the time. Usually about 3 minutes for my standard recipe versus about 5.5 for standard juicers. So that's really the biggest benefit of something like this, a wide mouth, is the speed. On the other hand, the juice they make does tend to be slightly pulpier. If you like pulp in your juice, that's no problem. You can also always strain out the pulp. One other big change they've made here is this feeding tube. What they've done is created a wider feeding tube. It's 82 millimeters. Their second gen model was 78. They did that by making this trap door system. And if you've seen our previous video about feeding tubes explained, you'll know I'm not fully thrilled about that trapdoor system. This came from their Kuvings Chef commercial model. That's what they put on here. And this is designed to take things that you would normally process in a juice bar. Things like peeled oranges or smaller apples. If you use a full-size apple, typically it won't quite fit in there. You need to use smaller ones. It's handy if you have an orchard or something. So this comes in at number 3. Why didn't it place any higher than that? Well, 3 is a good ranking, but you'll see when we show you number 2. So coming in at number 2 is an interesting choice. This one actually came in on some lists at number 1, so it was kind of close here. But this is the Omega MMV. That stands for Mega Mouth Vertical, another wide mouth vertical. And in fact, this is very similar to the Kuvings Elite model, which was the second gen model. So why would a second gen model beat a third gen model, a newer one? Well, there's a couple of reasons. For one, the MMV, since it's a little bit older, it's less expensive. Kind of significantly less expensive. Also, the refinements in the feeding tube, I mentioned I'm not a huge fan, but I am a big fan of the feeding tube on the MMV. It's a lot simpler. It's not that fiddly trapdoor system. Instead, it's just a big opening. There is a blade in there to keep little hands from reaching in. So if you're pushing an apple or something, that takes a little effort. But I just like this simple system of a big, wide 78 millimeter opening along with a big, huge pusher. It's just simple and it works well. Otherwise, performance is going to be similar to the third gen, to that Kuvings Evolution, which means fast juicing, maybe a bit more pulp than some other juicers. But overall, strong, good performance. It's a well-built machine. Service hasn't had any problems with these guys. So highly recommended, and coming in at number 2. Before I get to number 1, I want to show a couple of honorable mentions, ones that didn't quite make the list, but I thought should be on there. First one here, this is the Hurom H100, literally just arrived a couple of days ago, so we really haven't had a chance to fully test it. Now, Hurom has recently been kind of thinking out of the box, which is kind of nice. Juicer designs tend to be conservative. They're trying some new things, and they certainly did with the H100. First of all, the design's really different. Just the, I don't know, space age glossy look, the black and the chrome, using this rotating dial. A lot of interesting features on it, but the main reason I wanted to show it here as an honorable mention, you know, I mentioned earlier how all juicers use these metal juicing screens, and, well, not all juicers. Hurom is actually trying something completely different. They use these interlocking plastic pieces. When I first saw this, I thought it was kind of crazy. Like, how is that going to juice? There's an inner and an outer cylinder. They each have these cutouts, these like column-shaped cutouts, and they fit in just a way that there's a tiny little slit between them. And the pulp is pushed against those slits and then forced out. I tested it with carrots, and it actually tested fine. Gave me the same yield as I would get from most juicers, and the quality of the juice was fine also, not much pulp. We have tested it a bit with soft fruit. Notice there's some clogging. So I don't know if we just haven't learned all the tips and tricks to this thing. Like I said, it's pretty new to us. But just kudos for trying something new. You know, I don't know how many people want the main pressure point of your produce to be against plastic versus stainless steel. But it's cool they're trying something new, so that's an honorable mention. That's the Hurom H100. The other one I wanted to mention, this is the guy that's been our old reliable #1 favorite vertical juicer until just recently. This is the Sauna 808, or if you're in America, this is the Omega VSJ 843. A great juicer, a classic juicer, consistently rates really well. When this came out, it was a bit of a revelation. What they did is they came out with a 2-bladed auger, something we hadn't seen before, which is now pretty common. So when produce comes in, instead of 1 blade, like you'd see in those wide mouths I just showed you, there's 2. What this allowed them to do is cut the motor speed in half. It used to run around 80 RPM. This one runs at 43. It just means you get a real gentle juicing process and really good quality juice. Very minimal pulp, a real clear juice. So it just performs well. We liked the design when it came out. It looks a bit like an espresso machine, and it really just beat out the cut. In fact, this was one of them on my top 3 list personally, but when I tabulated everything, it just got moved off. Still a good juicer, especially for the price. It's priced less than any of the other juicers we've mentioned here. So 2 honorable mentions, completely different, something from the future, and a classic from the past that's still a fine juicer. So enough of that. I bet you're waiting. Let's see what's #1. And coming in at #1, this is the new Sauna 828 vertical juicer. This is the successor to the 808, which I mentioned there in the honorable mentions. What this does, it takes a lot of the features of that 808 and it refines them. It adds some new features and just improves upon the design. And we think those little additions add up to what, for most of us, is our favorite juicer, the one we would recommend. It has a sealed drive in the juicing chamber. What that means is there's no hole in the bottom for the auger to come through, the drive into the auger, but instead it's sealed. The drive shaft is built in. It means there can be no juice leakage through a hole there, through a gasket. Also, it has this pulp regulation lever. All this does is, excuse me, this opens up the chamber where the pulp is coming out. It's usually a real tight fit to get the highest yield, the most force and pressure. This releases a bit of that pressure, which comes in handy if you're juicing strawberries, pineapple, things like that. It keeps them from backing up, gives them a little more room to get the juice out. I found it handy actually at the end of juicing. If I'm doing a lot of carrots and leafy greens, just before the last carrot, I'll open this up to the half open position, and it kind of pushes any pulp that's inside out of the juicer. It just makes it easier to clean, I've found. Besides that, the feeding tube is redesigned, and it's probably the biggest difference for me. It's because I like to juice a lot of baby spinach along with carrots and apples. And the old design just had this small opening here and a tray. And a lot of times in a standard size opening, those baby spinach leaves can go everywhere. With this one, you can just shove them all in, and with the pusher, you just push it down, and it makes it a lot easier. It's good for berries and small things like cherry tomatoes too, but really for small leafy greens, it's almost a lifesaver. Another thing Sauna is known for is including a lot of accessories with their juicer, and they certainly did that here with the 828. The number 3 and the number 2 juicer, the Kuvings EVO and the Omega MMV, just come with one juicing screen, a fine juicing screen. You can order other screens as optional accessories. In the 828, it actually includes 3 juicing screens. The fine juicing screen, which you'll use most of the time. This one is the coarse juicing screen. It has much bigger holes, which means less pressure, kind of like you do here with the regulator. And again, for soft things, pineapple, stringy things like celery, softer apples. This will cause a lot less backup, and it will make those kind of ingredients a lot easier to juice. Also, it comes with a sorbet screen. This is just a solid piece. And this is mainly for frozen bananas mixed with berries. You put them in and it just mixes them all together, squeezes them together, and makes a nice ice cream substitute. I'll link a video where we made some of that recently. And in addition, instead of what pretty much every juicer comes with, that's plastic, plastic juice container and pulp container, Sauna comes with nice premium glass ones. Pretty big capacity too, 1.3 liter for the juice container. You might think, why get a glass pulp container? Mainly, yeah, it looks nice, but also some people like to save their pulp. They like to make cookies, they like to make muffins. You put them into a dehydrator, you can make crackers. This way you can make sure it doesn't come into contact or doesn't stay in contact with plastic. So that's our number 1 favorite juicer, the one we recommend. All 3 are great choices. Again, this is something if you want not necessarily the highest speed, but we found the highest quality juice. Very thin, very fine, almost no pulp. Really sweet juice too, we're surprised. The wider juicers, wider mouth, the number 2 and the 3, that's if you want speed, if you want something that's gonna juice a lot of things fast, you like the convenience of that wider feeding tube. So again, there's no best juicer, it's up to you. It's based on what you need, what you're gonna be juicing. That'll wrap things up. So thanks for watching. I'd love to hear what you think about our favorites, and tell us your favorites. What juicer are you using, or what's on your wish list? I'm sure other people would like to see that too. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see, some comparisons, maybe some reviews, we have access to just about every juicer out there. We'd love to do that for you. So until next time, I'm Dan, and thanks for watching.